The office of Arrow's unit commander isn't much to look at. A small room with a desk and 3 chairs, boarded up windows, a stained carpet covering a badly worn wood floor. All of it is illuminated by one naked light bulb powered by a generator that she can hear chugging away in another room. The bulb hangs from a wire into the middle of the room above the desk, and if she looks directly at it, she'll be blinded for the following 10 minutes by a glowing orb centered in her vision. She can never decide if the light had been placed in such an obtrusive location on any purpose, as some sort of intimidation technique, or if it's only poor design. In her experience, the Army excels in both intimidation and tastelessness. "You've been watched for some time now," her commander says, standing behind her and placing his hand on Arrow's shoulder in a way that seems as though it's meant to be reassuring. Arrow wonders whether he's referring to that morning's incident, the enemy sniper who'd been hunting her. In the time she spends considering this possibility, the hand from her shoulder goes from feeling benign to malevolent. She fights an urge to tear it off of her, rise from the hard chair she sits in, and drive the palm of her hand upward into the throat of her unit commander. "Many people are impressed with your abilities," he continues. It seems he isn't talking about this morning's sniper, so she calms down. He removes his hand and sits from behind his desk facing her. Nerman Filipovic is a good-looking man, dressed in a rumpled but clean camouflage fatigues. His beard is neatly trimmed and his hair is dark, if a little long. Arrow imagines it is soft to the touch. He's in his late 30s and, as far as she knows, isn't married. There's a small scar on his forehead above his right eye, and the nail on his right index finger has turned a dark purple, as though it has recently sustained a blow. He's a professional soldier. When the war began and Europe's 4th largest army turned inward on itself and surrounded the city, he was one of the few career officers to break ranks and defend the city against his former colleagues. If they fail and Sarajevo falls, if the men on the hills ever make it into the city, he will be one of the first people they execute. Arrow isn't sure what her position will be on their list. There's no way to tell how much they know about her. "We have a special assignment for you, an important assignment." Arrow nods. She suspected that he was working towards something like this. So far, they've been content to let her choose her own targets, have more or less alone, provided she continues to deliver bullets to worthy destinations. Lately, however, she has felt more attention being paid to her, and she knows that sooner or later they are going to ask her to do something she doesn't want to do. "I would remind you of our first conversation," she says, looking him straight in the eye, something she rarely does. 4 months after the war started, Nerman had sent a man to request that she come and see him. In a way, Arrow was surprised it had taken them so long to approach her. Most of the other members of the university target shooting team had already been approached. She would learn later that her father, who was a policeman, had asked Nerman to leave her out of it. He was killed in one of the first battles of the war, in front of the Sarajevo Canton building, and Arrow has never asked Nerman whether he felt her father would have changed his mind about her involvement in the city's defense, or if he simply decided to ignore the request of a dead man. She doesn't want to know the answer. "We need people who can shoot as well as you can," he said. "I've never shot at a person," she replied, knowing that quite recently this was probably true of most of the city's defenders, and maybe even its attackers, only at targets. "It's a matter of perspective," he said. "I don't want to kill people." "You'd be saving lives. Every one of those men on the hills will kill some of us. Given the chance, they will kill all of us." Arrow thought about this. She thought about what it would be like to pull the trigger and have her bullet hit a living being instead of a piece of paper. She was mildly surprised to find the thought didn't horrify her and that she could probably do it, and she could probably live with it. "I think this will end," she said. Her hands turned her coffee cup in a crosswise circle. She hadn't drunk any of it yet, and soon it would be cold. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the wall as if it were a window, as if it offered a view that could lend a new perspective to her statement. "It's a good view to take. I hope you're right. I don't see how it could last forever." He turned his gaze from the wall, seeming to sense she was moving towards stating an intent. Arrow nodded. "I think it will end, and when it does, I want to be able to go back to the life I had before. I want my hands to be clean." Nerman's eyes flickered down to where his own hands lay folded on his desk and then back up. She wasn't sure if he knew he had done this. It looked involuntary, and it still made her nervous. His hands moved to his lap. "I don't think any of us will be able to go back to the life we had before, however this ends, even those who keep their hands clean. If I do this, it will be done in a certain way. I won't blindly kill just because you say I must." She raised her cup to her mouth and drank. The coffee was good, strong and bitter, but no longer hot. So they reached an agreement. She would report only to Nerman. She would work alone, and for the most part, she would choose her own targets. Occasionally, Nerman had asked for someone specific, or that she work in a particular area, and thus far she had always been able to accommodate him. She's aware now that the woman who sat in this office that day and said she didn't want to kill anyone was gone, that with each passing week she's less and less certain that there will be an end to all of us. The parameters of their deal are dangerously close to irrelevance. This does not, however, reduce her resolve. If anything, her desire to adhere to her conditions to keep her hands clean has increased. Although she has nearly completely lost sight of the person she was, she still knows who she wants to be, and as far as she can see, the only path leading her towards this person is back through her former self. Norman looks at her for a long time. She can see that he's considering saying something to her, and she suspects it's about her role in defending the city, but he doesn't. He stands, walks past her, opens the door, and motioning with his hand for her to follow him. I have something to show you, he says, turning to her. Don't worry, this is as clean as you're going to get. Wait, Norman says, looking at his watch. It's almost time. Arrow knows the street well. It's in the heart of the city, just past the point where the Turkish buildings give way to the Austro-Hungarian ones. Further down is the Second World War Memorial, the Eternal Flame, which has gone out. So that's really important, right? The flame has gone out, and the flame was about the idea of you're not going to repeat the same mistakes that happened in World War II. Behind her is the street where she used to meet friends for a coffee when she was in university, and the river isn't far to the south, and past that are the southern hills of the city, where a cable car once carried people to the top of Mount Trebevic. They're standing in the doorway of a shop that's no longer open across from an indoor public market. Arrow knows that not long ago a mortar shell landed in the street and killed a large number of people. She heard all about it on the radio, and although it was unusual for so many people to be killed in one spot at a time, she didn't think much about the incident then. It was simply how things were, she supposed. The opportunity to die was everywhere, and it just wasn't that surprising when the opportunity became an event. Now, however, standing in the street where it happened, it seems to her that something significant occurred here. So this incident where the motor shell killed a bunch of people, that is the one that they talked about in the prologue when the people were lining up to get bread. Norman, who hasn't looked, smiles. Oh, an explosion groans to the west of them, and Arrow involuntarily looks in the direction of the sound. Norman, who hasn't looked, smiles. I think they're trying to send us a message. What is the message, he asks, as another shell lands in the same area. Norman shrugs. I don't know. I'm making a special effort not to listen. Okay, here he comes. At first, Arrow isn't sure whether to trust what she sees. She even wonders if it's possible she's hallucinating, if perhaps she has died and this is how the transition to whatever follows death takes place, through a series of unbelievable circumstances. But gradually she accepts she's still alive and she's lucid, and this is happening. A tall man with turbulent black hair's almost comic mustache and the saddest face she has ever seen emerges from a doorway. He wears a slightly dusty tuxedo and carries a cello under an arm, a stool under the other. He walks out of the building with a calm and determined stride, appearing oblivious to the danger he's putting himself in, sits his stool in the middle of the street, sits down and positions his instrument between his legs. What is he doing? She asks, but Norman doesn't answer. The cellist opens his eyes and remains still, his arms hanging limp. It appears as though the cello stays upright by its own will, independent of the man surrounding it. The wood glows rich and warm against the drab gray of shattered paving stones, and she feels an urge to touch it, to run her fingers over the lacquered surface. Her hand reaches out, a futile attempt to bridge a distance far greater than 30 or so meters that separate her from the cello. The cellist opens his eyes. The sadness in his face is gone. She doesn't know where it went. His arms rise, and his left hand grips the neck of the cello. His right guides the bow to its throat. It is the most beautiful thing she has ever seen. When the first notes sound, they are, to her, inaudible. Sound has vanished from the world. So this is the first time that Arrow hears the cellist play.